Hi everybody, how lovely that I get to come and teach you music. Now, I have heard that you are looking at the Tudors, and I have to say that I find the Tudors really, really interesting. I'm particularly intrigued by King Henry VIII. I can't understand how he could have so many wives, and it's so interesting learning all about their stories. Did you know that Henry VIII was considered to be a very intelligent man? He spoke many languages, he wrote poetry and he studied philosophy, trying to understand why we are here and gaining knowledge. He studied religion and was also considered to be a very good athlete in his younger days. King Henry was also very musical, and he had a large collection of musical instruments. He was believed to have been a very talented musician, and he wrote songs. He composed ballads, which are calmer and slower songs. He wrote music for church, and although sadly these songs have been lost, we know this because of the stories that have been passed down. He played several instruments, and when he died, he left behind him a collection of instruments which included 5 bagpipes, 78 recorders, 78 flutes, and a mechanical virginal. You might recognise the names of some of these instruments. I did too, but I had no idea what a mechanical virginal was, and it made me wonder what it looked like and what it sounded like. So I've done some investigating, and I found lots of instruments from Tudor times that I had never seen before. Some that I recognised, some that I didn't. Shall we have a look at some of them together? Let's start with a mechanical virginal. Have a look at this picture. A virginal is a keyboard instrument, and it's part of the harpsichord family. A harpsichord is a bit like a pipe organ, and it has 2 sets of keys, a bit like the ones you'd find on a piano. A virginal is smaller than a harpsichord, and you can see on the picture that there is just 1 set of keys, just like a piano. A virginal has got strings inside it, but unlike the piano, you can hear the strings being played, almost like a choir of strings. Let's have a little listen. Just as you play the piano, you would play the virginal with your fingers on the keyboard, but it sounds completely different to a piano. It sounds like a string instrument. You can hear the strings being played there. Now, the next instrument that we're going to have a look at is the bagpipes, just like Henry VIII had. Have a look at these. They look quite similar to how they look today, although they are less ornate and much simpler. They were made using goat skin or sheepskin, and they had a reed pipe in the mouthpiece to make the sound. Shall we have a listen to what they sounded like then? They sound similar to the bagpipes that we would hear today, except perhaps they're not quite as powerful and they're a bit quieter. And bagpipes that we would see today aren't made of sheepskin or goatskin anymore. They're made of a different kind of material. The next instrument we're going to have a look at are recorders. And you've all seen a recorder. You've all had a go at playing a recorder. Apparently, Henry VIII was an exceptional recorder player. You will notice that these recorders are made of wood, unlike ours today that are made of plastic. They do look similar to our modern recorder though. They still have holes in pretty much the same places, and the mouthpiece is a similar shape. Shall we have a listen and see if we can hear any differences? They do sound a bit different to our modern recorders, don't they? They're softer in sound, and it's probably because they're made of wood. You might notice as well that there were 3 recorders being played there. And basically, the longer the recorder is, the lower the notes. So if you're playing a really small recorder, the notes are much higher. The pitch of that recorder is much higher. And if you've got a really long recorder, the pitch is much lower. So that piece of music that you listened to was 3 recorders being played at the same time, all different sizes, all different sounds. It's the same for Tudor flutes as well. The shorter the flute is, the higher the sound. So if you have a really long flute, it's going to make a lower sound. The Tudors still played the flute the same as we would today, just to the side. Have a look at them. Modern flutes today are made of metal, and the Tudor ones would have all been made out of wood. Let's have a listen to them. They're a really soft sound, aren't they? Our modern flutes that are made of metal still sound soft. They do sound quite similar, actually. The next instrument that we're going to have a look at is a harp. And we still have harps today, except our harps are much bigger. They're usually as tall as the person who's playing them. And the person who's playing them has to sit and wrap their legs around the harp. But a Tudor harp was much smaller. This picture is of a Tudor harp, and it's actually made of gold. It's the kind of harp that would have been played in court for dances and important occasions. It was said that a single pluck could send the listener into a peaceful slumber. That's another word for sleep. Let's have a listen, but don't fall asleep. A harp in the Tudor times wouldn't have had as many strings as our modern harps have now, but it does still sound really beautiful. The next instrument, I think, has become my favourite Tudor instrument. It's called a hurdy-gurdy. Everybody say hurdy-gurdy. It's a really unusual instrument, and it's got a really unusual name. It was played by turning a small wheel with one hand while the other hand pressed down on the strings to adjust their pitch. It's got a really unusual sound too. Shall we have a listen? Now, the only modern instrument that I can think of that sounds like a hurdy-gurdy is the bagpipes, but they don't look anything like it. And this instrument has got strings on it, and a bagpipe isn't a stringed instrument, it's a woodwind instrument. So I thought that was a really interesting instrument. I've never heard one of those before. The next instrument that we're going to look at is called a rebec. This instrument was pear-shaped and usually had just 4 strings. It was played with a bow. What does that remind you of? It reminds me of a violin. But it doesn't sound quite as smooth as a violin when it's played really well. Shall we have a listen? It does sound a bit like a violin, doesn't it? Although I think a violin does sound a bit smoother and less clunky than a rebec. This instrument is called a psaltery, and it starts with a P. It's got a silent P at the beginning of it. The psaltery was played sitting down with the instrument played on a performer's lap. It's a stringed instrument, and you can see by the picture the kind of shape that it was. 2 feather quills were used to pluck at the strings, 1 in each hand. They vary widely in shape and the number of strings. So let's have a listen. I think it sounds a bit like plucking a classical guitar. Another instrument that is similar to a guitar is a lute. And the lute was probably the most famous instrument in Tudor times. As you can see, it looks very similar to a guitar, but you might notice that the head, that's the bit at the top, goes back at an angle. You might see different shaped heads on electric guitars today, but not normally a bent head. The lute is obviously not electric, so we know it won't sound like an amazing rock guitar solo. But it might sound a bit like an acoustic guitar. Shall we have a listen? I really hope that you've enjoyed learning about some of these instruments. I think you're going to get really excited about the topic of Tudors. Can you see that there are so many instruments from the Tudor times that have probably inspired some of our more modern instruments today? Obviously, the sounds have developed as the knowledge of making instruments has grown over time, but you'll have heard some really beautiful melodies today and sounds that were very typical in Tudor times. Don't forget that they didn't have iPods, they didn't have Spotify or Apple Music. All their music was played live, as they didn't have any ways to record it, and that is sadly why Henry VIII's songs have been lost, so we only know about his musical talents by the stories that have been passed down through the years. Maybe you'd like to draw a picture of one of these instruments and write down some facts about it. If you do, send it to me. I would really love to see it. You can always go back on this video and pause the picture of the instrument that you'd like to draw and then listen again to the facts. You could also have a look online if your grown-up says it's okay, just to see if you can find out any more information about that instrument. You might be able to hear even more Tudor music played if you search on YouTube. King Henry also enjoyed grand pageants and banquets. These would include a jester who sang and played practical jokes on the guests, music to dance to, and musicians who sang for the king's pleasure were always there. Next time, we're going to have a little look at some Tudor fanfares and see if we can learn about rhythmic notation. Look forward to seeing you then.